Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Do you have questions?
Are the co-authors of the Rock and Roll Explorer Guide to San Francisco and the Bay Area, which is here, and has also been included in our collection. So you can check it out today. I've been reading it and it's so awesome. They also have a guide to New York City and a book called The Little Book of Rock and Roll and Wisdom. They are doing a lot of really cool music archiving stuff. I saw that there's like an upcoming punk book that you have, right? Or I don't know if that's out. Okay, awesome. Let's see, a former career bookseller, Mike reinvented himself as a writer and photographer. In addition to 3 books co-authored with Crispin, he has contributed articles and photos to a variety of topics for print and online publications in the US and in France. He is currently engaged in a project chronicling historic recordings for the Library of Congress. And Crispin is the co-author of Legs McNeil's Please Kill Me, The Uncensored Oral History of Punk, a forthcoming memoir, Resident Punk, How I Smoked, Drank, and Stumbled My Way Through the 70s punk scene and beyond. A longtime journalist covering music, culture, and much more, Crispin has been published in many online and print media outlets. He lives with his wife Eve and their daughter Margaret in Oakland. Without further ado, welcome our guests, Mike Katz and Crispin Kott. All right. Check to see if that microphone works. It should, right?
Hello.
Awesome. So,
Got the New York book too.
oh, awesome. So they brought both. So I'm gonna ask a few questions. The first, so what captivated you to engage in the work of music archiving? And like in an age where information is being disseminated, expunged, and repurposed at a rapid pace, like what is the importance of archiving?
Well, the way we got started on this several years back, like a lot of great projects, it begins with unemployment. I had worked in New York in bookselling at a variety of levels for many, many years, and after the economic downturn of 2010, I had some time on my hands. So I spent a lot of time exploring the city, just on foot, running around, crossing all the bridges, and trying to come up with the idea for some theme that would unite this experience, this whole business of sort of urban exploration. And simultaneous to this, Crispin and I had known each other for many years, and we kicked around various ideas for music books for a long time. And somehow, and I'll let him sort of finish this story, we went to a music event in New York that kind of, like the big light bulb in the sky went off, and we connected the dots and we decided to embark on this.
It was at the, actually the main branch of the, New York Public Library, and it was a book event for a book called New York Art, The Velvet Underground. And so the surviving members were there except for John Cale. But, and there was just sort of, Lou Reed was talking about doo-wop and how he had been like a staff songwriter at a record label that sort of churned out these albums that were in the zeitgeist, like write me 10 songs on surf music this week, and so that we found out that that was in Long Island City, Queens, and so it kind of expanded on our wanting to find all these places. And in a city that, like here, in this area, a lot of this stuff is not really officially cataloged or honored in any way.
I mean, that's kind of the strange thing, is that despite the fact that a lot of this is fairly recent history, it's not particularly well recorded, and there's a lot of conflicting information, a lot of oral histories that don't agree with each other, and a lot of names of different venues and things that changed several times over the years. And so one thing led to another, and we decided that we would do a history of rock and roll in New York City and organize it kind of like a travel guide for the urban explorer, so that you could actually visit all of these places. You know, there are other aspects of history that have done this kind of thing for years. You know, you walk the Freedom Trail in Philadelphia, or those kinds of things. But nobody really ever done that for rock and roll, at least not in any way that it was was even remotely comprehensive. So for us, the trick was trying to come up with as much information and be as expansive and as inclusive as we possibly could, and yet fill it into a book that you could actually carry with one hand.
Or throw into a backpack.
Exactly. And once we had done the New York book, we kind of had a template for it. And the next obvious candidate we thought was San Francisco in this area, in the Bay Area. And so, make a long story short, we both moved out here. And, we wrote the book. It didn't quite take us quite as long as the New York one did because we, as I said, we had developed a template for how this kind of thing would fit together. But, and the geography is very different. But, we did our best and we figured out how to make it work. And the book is the end result.
Awesome.
Okay. There are countless examples of Bay Area musicians making a profound impact on the overall genealogy of music history, right? So some examples of that would be like Spit Boy, right, having an influence on the later Riot Girl and feminist punk band wave, right? Etta James having her singing techniques being influential for Janis Joplin, Keith Richards, Diana Ross, Amy Winehouse, Sly Stone. I'm very biased because I'm from Vallejo, so I'm going to mention him a lot. So he pioneered funk and subsequent decades of soul and R&B. But a lot of people don't know sometimes that he also had a profound influence on jazz fusion with Herbie Hancock, and Betty Davis played Sly's records for Miles, and that kind of started his electric period, right? So there's this profound impact on this genealogy of music history. Are there any music techniques or trends that were pioneered by Bay Area musicians that you would like to highlight?
Well, since you mentioned Sly Stone, it's important to point out that before he ever made records, he was a very successful record producer and DJ named Sylvester Stewart. And he produced all kinds of things, not just, R&B records. He produced pop albums, he did everything. So he was a highly sophisticated guy musically, and and was very much aware of the Bay Area's history in R&B, which goes back much further than people realize. It goes back almost to the turn of the century. And so when he had this idea about let's merge these things together, it felt revolutionary to a lot of people, but I think it was just a natural progression of all of the things that he had been working on for all of those years. And yes, it was incredibly influential. Beyond Sly Stone, you mentioned Janis Joplin. Yeah. I'll also throw Jefferson Airplane and Grace Slick in there, two of the first women to front legit rock bands. Big Brother and the Holding Company and Jefferson Airplane.
Big Brother, Holding Company's up there with Grateful Dead, and then Airplane over there. Yeah. So.
And it's worth pointing out that that sort of came from everybody who was in that sort of classic rock period in San Francisco emerged from the folk scene, really, including all the guys in Jefferson Airplane, as well as Janis Joplin, Grateful Dead, Quicksilver Messenger Service, anybody that you want to name. They all came up through this sort of collegiate folk circuit, played all the colleges and things around here. Everybody knew everybody else. And so for them, the idea of having a woman fronting a rock band was a natural progression of everything they had done. It wasn't so much that they were trying to make a big statement, but it became one, and it's actually a trend that took several years really to catch on, this idea of women leading rock bands, but Big Brother and Jefferson Airplane kind of led the way in that area.
Around that time too, Sly and the Family Stone and Santana were bands that kind of brought integration. There were a lot of people from different races and in these bands, and that was kind of not the norm yet. And so you have to give them a lot of credit for that too. Yeah. The scene was kind of open to that in a way that it might not have been elsewhere.
Yeah. Very true. This book has so the Rock and Roll Explorer Guide to San Francisco and the Bay Area has a lot of really cool or interesting concert stories about local luminaries, and then also just like really crazy tour stories. There's stories about the Beatles, the Sex Pistols, the Who, Rolling Stones. Are there any concert stories from the book that you would like to share with audience members, just like for people who are trying to get a feel of the book if they end up reading it?
Yeah, I don't need a mic. Can everybody hear me? Good.
What?
You can hear me? The Who played at the Cow Palace on 1973, yeah, and Keith Moon went too far even for Keith Moon and passed out behind the drums, and they called up a kid basically from the crowd, and he came up and played a few songs with them to close out the show. That was the only time that anybody had played with the Who other than Keith Moon until Keith Moon died. So that was kind of a big deal, and that happened at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. There was, of course, the Beatles played their last kind of organized concert at Candlestick Park. What else?
Altamont?
Altamont, yeah, sure. That's on the dark side of that. I mean, that whole thing was a mess, which is we go kind of a long way of covering that in the book. And even like Fantasy Fair, yeah, which is on Mount Tamalpais. How was that pronounced?
Mount Tamalpais?
Tamalpais? Sorry, I'm from New York.
Yeah.
Tamalpais?
Yeah. Or just Mount
Mount Tam. Mount Tam. All right, we'll go with
I
that.
mean, actually preceded the Monterey Pop Festival.
By like
It was
a
one
week.
Right, it was one of the very first sort of big outdoor multi-group festivals, and had groups like The Doors, and who else was there?
Well, the Doors were there and not
Actually,
at...
behind everyone,
right?
there's a Mount Tam poster for the one above the Otis Redding one.
Oh, okay.
So that's actually that, yeah.
Okay,
I
yeah,
didn't even know about the amphitheater up there till about 8
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful.
yeah. And that was like a huge thing with many of the same bands that played like a week later at Monterey. I also, just yesterday was the 30th, of course it's not loading yet, the 30th anniversary of a radio show, a radio station's annual Christmas show at nearby, about a mile away from here at Berkeley Community Theater. It was headlined by Oasis, he's wearing the shirt. Sonic Youth played, Radiohead, Jawbreaker, lots of different bands played that, no doubt. And that was 30 years ago yesterday, so that was kind of a cool memory.
One thing worth pointing out that kind of feeds into your previous question as well, and that is the variety of the kind of acts that people could see in San Francisco and in the Bay Area that was kind of unique. You could go to the Fillmore and you could see Santana, Miles Davis, Big Mama Thornton, Steve Miller Band, Creedence Clearwater Revival, like on one bill. There was one instance we had the Rolling Stones played with the Beach Boys. You had like this variety of acts where they weren't, like the way that they sort of build acts was not quite as marketed and as sort of corporately organized as it is now. You had these completely disparate sort of groups and artists performing together on one bill, and I think that was that's an intrinsic part of what made the whole San Francisco Bay Area scene unique at that time, in the mid to late 60s.
Awesome. So, I touched on it a little bit with the Mount Tam poster, but the Bay Area music scene inspired a lot of various types of arts, most notably the psychedelic art of people like Rick Griffin, Wes Wilson, Alton Kelly, etc. How important was the supplemental art to the music scene? And then also, most posters nowadays look very uniform and uninspired, like in comparison to like some of the psychedelic art you can see behind you. Why do you feel like there was a decline over the years in that sort of expressive style that kind of popped out in the 60s and 70s?
I'm going to agree and disagree with you at the same time. I think that there are still a lot of great posters and things made. It's worth pointing out that Rick Griffin and Alton Kelly and Stanley Mouse and a lot of these people at Wes Wilson who did a lot of these fantastic posters, it was a great sort of artistic outlet for some struggling artists at a time, and they came up with this style that was very much influenced by Japanese woodblock prints, Alphonse Mucha, Art Nouveau posters from the 19th century and all kinds of things like that. And but they weren't really paid very much for those things. And I think that they all kind of found more lucrative ways to make a living. At some point, they developed their own poster company and distribution company based here in Berkeley, as a matter of fact, that would ship the, you'd see ads in the backs of comic books and High Times and things like that, where you could order different posters. A lot of the things that they did for Bill Graham and for Chet Helms, they didn't own. So they were created as kind of disposable. Despite that fact, very interestingly, and then sort of circling around to something else, one of the figures that was key in developing the lithographic process for making these things was Marty Ballin's father, who was a printer. Marty Ballin, one of the co-founders of the Jefferson Airplane. So it's a pretty tight little world. So and another reason why a lot of these posters, kind of went away is that those venues went away. The Avalon Ballroom and the Fillmore and Winterland and things, they didn't actually last that long, despite the sort of seismic historical impact that they had. These guys found other things to do to make more money. A lot of them continued on and designed album covers and things. You were playing that Journey tune earlier.
Yeah.
Was it Alton Kelly, I think, who designed the
Stanley Mouse.
Stanley Mouse. Sometimes they collaborated and they designed all of those album covers and things, and which was a bit more lucrative than doing these kind of one-off concert posters. So, and then kind of the part where I disagree with you is that, there are a lot of boring posters around, but there are also a lot of really interesting ones that I think are designed for the collector market, and because bands, frankly, need to sell more merch to make money, because the recordings is not quite as lucrative as it once was. You go to anybody's website, Bob Dylan or anyone else, and they've all got all these posters that you can buy. And some of them are pretty cool. The posters that we're talking about, some of the ones you've got on the wall back here are really historical and really emblematic of that era. But those, most of those guys never really went away. They just kind of found other ways to make a living.
Some of that stuff went away too because it started showing up in. Sorry. Some of that stuff went away too because it started showing up at like ads, and once Madison Avenue kind of co-ops it, it's not really all that cool anymore. And then I would also say that like in the '70s in San Francisco certainly, and then in the '80s on this side of the Bay, a lot of DIY punk flyers and things like that were also kind of just as critical to those scenes as these beautiful posters were to the '60s scenes. And there's a lot of nice stuff happening now too. Like there's a lot of great poster artists, and there's also been lately a pushback against AI generated flyers. Like the Store Club in Oakland was like, if your band gives us one of those flyers, you're not playing here. Which is great because artists should be doing this stuff instead of a computer prompt.
Yeah.
All right. So we touched on a few venues like Avalon. The book mentions, a lot of legendary music venues like Fillmore, Winterland, Ballroom, Great American Music Hall, Avalon, etc. Can you speak to how the music scene in the Bay directly influenced like the architectural design of these venues? And also, what are some challenges that remaining venues have with staying open, because some of them have closed? And what do you think is the future of music venues in the Bay Area?
Well, I think a lot of these, sorry. I think a lot of these places like the Fillmore and Avalon Ballroom and things, those existed before. And they were kind of vacant when like Bill Graham took over the Fillmore. He made a deal, probably not a very nice deal for the guy who sold it. But they kind of adapted what they were doing into these places rather than the other way around. Like, Marty Ballin, he started a club in the Matrix in San Francisco, so maybe he had more influence on that. I also found a couple of like really fun, that are in the book, fun sort of like ridiculous zeitgeisty places like Wayne Manor in Sunnyvale. These were in the 60s. That was like modeled after the Batman TV series.
Oh, wow.
There was Winchester Cathedral where Sly and the Family Stone played. They just put out some live recordings of the early versions of the band from there.
Awesome.
That was in Redwood City. There was a place in San Rafael called Pepperland that was sort of based on Yellow Submarine era Beatles stuff.
That was in the book too, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a lot of, the places that sort of like opened in these ways that were influenced by culture were more outside of the city, and inside the city people were opening in places that were already well suited to having live music performed there. And they kind of, it feels like the Fillmore belongs to music, but it was something before that. Belongs to that scene, but it was something before that.
I mean, it's worth pointing out that the within San Francisco especially, like all of these venues, where they were and when they were, was largely driven by economics, real estate values, who lived in those areas, et cetera. I mean, it's a very similar story to what we discovered when we did research on the New York book. A lot of those legendary venues, it was a ballroom that somebody that was converted into like a rock place, until it reached the point where the neighbors, thought it was too loud, and then that was the end of that. And then sort of Chet Helms moved the Avalon Ballroom to a place on the Great Highway where it promptly failed because like nobody wanted to go there, and that was the end of that. And Bill Graham bounced from one facility after another until, frankly, the industry and the artists that he had supported became too big for him to support in those venues, and the economics of the industry demanded that they start playing in hockey arenas and baseball stadiums and things, and that was the way they could make money. And the ballroom-sized venues kind of declined until really the rise of sort of the alt-rock movement much later. When did the Fillmore close initially, Crispin?
1971, I think.
71, and then when did it reopen again?
In the 90s, I think.
Yeah, so it was. So there was really only like that, when people think about, all these classic San Francisco bands and all these great posters and things, it was a relatively brief moment in time when these things kind of worked. The promoter has to make money, the artists have to make money, the record labels have to make money, and if the venue can't drive that revenue, then the venue can't continue. Exactly how we answer the question of, the last part of your question, which is what's the future. Right now we live in a world where a handful of companies control, an outsized number of venues and artists and all of that. I don't really know what the answer is. What do you think?
Well, it was just announced in New York that Music Hall of Williamsburg, which was like a big concert venue for a long time, is going to close at the end of 2026 because their landlord won't renew their lease.
Oh, wow.
And when these venues don't own their own buildings, they're at the mercy of sort of like, unscrupulous, greedy real estate barons who will shut them down. But at the same time, I read just today that there was, a great article in SF-Gate by Jessica Lipsky that the Great American Music Hall just had their most profitable year in like 4 decades or something like that. So like places can, I don't know if thrive is the right word, but they can exist if they're able to kind of adapt to that stuff. And certainly owning your own building helps.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So, punk rock has always been a subversive, thought-provoking genre that is filled with moments of shock value. However, there are attempts at creating shock value that did not age well and or simply just didn't land as intended. Examples in the Bay punk scene. So, like with Dead Kennedys, like they have, great records like Nazi Punk's F Off. They have Night of the Living Rednecks and all these things. But also, there's also, records like Holiday in Cambodia, and we've got a bigger problem now where they use the N-word. As well as the Avengers having the record White N-Word, which is a part of a lengthy history of white punks using the N-word that goes back to Patti Smith and kind of branches out pretty far into crazy parts like Gigi Allen, who was like such a far out person. And other examples in rock and roll in the Bay would include like the minstrel caricature on the cover of Big Brother and the Holding Company's Cheap Thrills album cover, and also Creedence Clearwater Revival being forced by their former manager to adapt the stage name The Gollywogs, which was something that John Fogerty always hated, always was against, and then, you know, when they kind of made it big, they changed to Creedence Clearwater, but their old manager forced them to do that, right? So it wasn't of their own doing. So when these things come to mind, basically, what is the function of shock value in rock music, namely but not limited to punk rock? And is there ever a line that should not be crossed or people should be mindful of?
Well, let's start in the 60s part of your equation with Big Brother and the Cheap Thrills album cover, which was drawn by Robert Crumb in 1968 and was created as kind of a satirical version of like an old minstrel show poster, you know, as you said. Would that fly today? Probably not. At the same time, based on what we know about Crumb and what we know about the people in Big Brother, they probably didn't think that, I mean, and to be completely candid, and they probably didn't think that it was any more offensive than a bottle of Aunt Jemima pancake syrup. You know, we have to remember that we lived then in a society where products, advertisements, movies, television shows, Saturday morning cartoons were loaded with racial and ethnic stereotypes and caricatures, and that was a part of the landscape. Thankfully, we have evolved a bit as a society, and we don't do that as much as we used to. But like, if there was a product for Chinese food or something, it typically had a caricatured Asian person on it, and that was the kind of stuff that was acceptable for a long, long time. You know, it's also worth pointing out, we're talking about these posters and things before. The 60s counterculture movement, the hippie movement, also had like a big American Indian fetish. And there was a lot of American Indian imagery in a lot of these posters. And a lot of these people wore outfits that sort of looked like that. They also had a lot of naked women and things in these posters. I mean, these things probably would not go today. You know, today, I mean, every album cover, every concert poster probably has to go through 3 layers of legal teams, and it just wouldn't work. I'm guessing that people in those days, you know, occasionally would say, really? Is this a good idea? You know, but they did it, and it was accepted. And we have great nostalgia for all that stuff. But you're right, we live in a different world today, and that stuff would not be acceptable, you know, today.
I would like to think that the punks who were using the N-word is kind of, I can't speak for them. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I would like to think that they were coming from a place where they're trying to make a point about something. And I think the examples that you gave are bands that generally have been on the right side of that equation. The Dead Kennedys stuff came before D.H. Pellegrino joined the group. So they were all white at the time that they were saying that.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't know. I can't speak for them. I personally think, I mean, that's the 70s. I was in elementary school, so I grew up slightly later. But I would like to think that, you know, you don't see that so much anymore.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
I think shock value can be great, but certainly those are lines that probably shouldn't be crossed. And like, you know, like Nazi stuff that people like the punks in England kind of flirted with, and members of the Rolling Stones and the Who kind of, you know, wore swastikas and dressed up in that stuff on occasion too. And
The
it's,
metal scene.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that goes around, and you hope that that it's just for shock value.
Yeah.
I know that Ron Ashton from the Stooges was a big like Nazi enthusiast and would wear iron crosses, but I don't know how far his fascination went.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I think shock value can be great in rock and roll if it has a purpose.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of the stuff that we talked about definitely crosses the line today for sure.
Yeah. For sure. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Now, folks, we're talking about the 70s. I'm going to talk about the era that I grew up in, and, you know, an idol of that era. I grew up in the 90s. So, Kurt Cobain once said, "I wouldn't wear a tie-dye t-shirt unless it was dyed with the urine of Phil Collins and the blood of Jerry Garcia."
Harsh.
Yeah. And for me, I grew up in the '90s, so Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Tad, all of that is pretty much up my alley. That's like my go-to. So Kurt was like, he was like the coolest thing. So for him, like he had all these shirts that said "Kill the Grateful Dead," or he just talked about how much he didn't like the Grateful Dead. I was a little kid. I just was like, well, he said it, so screw them. You know what I mean? It's kind of like with hip hop, like with Tupac. It's like, you know, after the East Coast, like it was like all these people. I was like, I'm not listening to them because, you know, Tupac's the coolest. So it was kind of like that, just in like alternative rock. Cobain, Kurt was very vocal about his disdain for the Grateful Dead, and so were artists like Steve Miller. I kind of agree with Steve's. He kind of was like, you know, I'm better than all these psychedelic artists, and and I kind of agree. Keith Richards and the Ramones also were very, very vocal about their disdain. I think there was one of the guys from Modest Mouse also like was very like against it. But long story short, the Grateful Dead have a reputation for being like a love them or hate them kind of band. So in your opinion, what makes them so polarizing? And for anyone who's wondering, even though I played like a couple records, I'm not a Deadhead. So if we want to talk psychedelia, I'm more like Jefferson Airplane, Chocolate Watch Band, Country Joe, and the Big Fish, you know, stuff like that. Or Steve Miller, you know, who adamantly despised them. So yeah, what makes them so polarizing?
Okay. Marguerite, cover your ears. When I was in college, the Grateful Dead were still around, and I hated them. Because I was like, I hadn't really listened to them yet, right? And the only thing I knew about the Grateful Dead was if we wanted to buy weed, we would go to a Dead show and hang around, and until somebody stopped looking at us like we were a bunch of narcs, something could happen. I'm not gonna say what, so don't, you can listen again. So I felt that way into my 20s, and then I had an epiphany where I was at a movie theater called the Angelica in New York City. My dad took me to see a movie called Swingers, which was a big 90s, it's a good movie. And at the Angelica, they show like short films before, and the short film they showed was Paul McCartney had taken a bunch of photos that Linda McCartney had shot of the Dead and the hate scene and everything like that, and set them to some music from Anthem of the Sun, which is an album from 1968 that the Dead recorded, infuriating their label, and it was like a mix of like studio stuff and live stuff and found sounds, and it was sort of meant to emulate an acid trip, right? And it does. Yeah. But I was sitting there, and I started seeing the Grateful Dead, and I turned to my dad, and I made the dumb Grateful Dead joke. What did the Deadhead say when he ran out of drugs? These guys suck. And then but somehow during that short film, it was like 8 minutes long, the tumblers fell into place, and I was like, oh shit, I like them now, I get it. And so I'm not a tape collector. I don't, there's plenty of stuff I'm not into. But I kind of get it now. And I also get why they're polarizing, because I was on the opposite side of that equation where it's just like, what the hell are they doing? You know, they're just like, why are they playing the same thing for 40 minutes? I didn't get it. I get it now. My wife doesn't like them though.
Air high five.
I think they're polarizing because they do what they do, and I think they're probably polarizing because people don't get why so many people love it, and why people seem to be happy when they're there. And Keith Richards doesn't like anybody but the Rolling Stones and who else? Peter Tosh. That's all. Yeah, and Chuck Berry, and that's it. That's the Keith Richards talks shit about everybody. I shouldn't say that word in the library. I'm sorry. The word being Keith Richards. So I understand why people don't get it. And there's room for you too when you finally figure it out.
Well, I mean, there's there's a few songs, right, over the years, but I kind of go back into just being like a grunge kind of guy, and just being like, nah, I can't do this. Kurt would look down. Kurt is looking down from, and he's just like, don't do this.
Well, let me add to this, because Crispin and I just recently had a very spirited conversation on this topic. And I'm a little bit older than he is, and so my college experience was similar in that I went to a school that had a lot of deadheads, most of whom came from New York State and New Jersey. And this was in New Orleans. And if you embrace the dead, if you embrace the sort of dead culture, it was like instant community. You immediately had hundreds of new friends and things. So for me, this was an incredible turnoff. And I wanted nothing to do with this. So for me, it wasn't even, I think I disliked them before I even heard the music. So it took many years before I paid attention to them. And then I came to the conclusion I just thought they were boring. I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't hate their fans or any of that kind of stuff. I think I have a better appreciation for them musically and their roots and what they were trying to do. Frankly, after working on this book and after talking with Crispin a lot, because I know he did an enormous amount of homework when he wrote the chapter on them. So I think it's like a lot of things. I think I can appreciate them on a certain academic level, but I don't actually enjoy listening to them in my free time.
That's fair.
You just don't understand, man.
Yeah. I don't either. Okay. So this book mentions some legendary recording studios in the Bay, like the Record Plant, Fantasy Studios, and Pacific Studios. In your opinion, what are some of the greatest songs and or albums that were created in the Bay Area recording studio? For me, I'm a 90s kid, and I saw in the book that Mariah Carey's first album, Emotions, was recorded out here. I'm a big Mariah Carey fan, just ballads and singing and, when I'm in the shower, I sing those songs, not in public because I can't sing that good. So, but yeah, what are some songs that or albums that were recorded out here that you think are like really great?
We kind of thought about this question about artists who weren't from here who came here to record. So like Fleetwood Mac recorded some. They started recording Rumors they recorded it in a lot of studios wherever they followed the cocaine, I think. But they recorded some of that at the record plant in Sausalito. They recorded one of the songs on it, I can't remember which, at Zellenbach Hall because they wanted to get an empty Zellenbach Hall here, about a mile from here. But they wanted to get like a feel for a music hall, an empty music hall on that song, because probably again cocaine. So that's like bands like that coming up here was happening at a time when studios up here got really good, and it took a long time to get there.
Yeah.
The Clash recorded some of their second album, Given Up. Mount Tamd is down. They recorded some of their second album, Given Up Rope, at a studio called the Automat in San Francisco. That building has been since knocked down into some awful apartment building now.
Oh, man.
What else?
Well, I mean, it's again most of the sort of classic rock era San Francisco albums were. They initially did their like Jefferson Airplane, etc. They usually did their recording in L.A. until Wally Heider built a studio in San Francisco in 1968, and that became like the hub of all kinds of great records, and still exists today under a different name.
As Hyde Street.
Hyde Street.
It's in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, and there's like a plaque on the ground there.
Yeah, and according
Studios,
to according to Grace Slick, the neighborhood was actually worse then. Yeah, a lot of great records were made there. I kind of wanted to give you a sort of oblique answer to your question and talk about a recording studio that's been really totally forgotten, but that was very important. And that is, as it relates to the old West Oakland R&B race records scene that existed, from like the 30s into the 60s. And there was an impresario named Bob Geddens who had a studio and a pressing plant in his garage, and he had about 14 different record labels. and he was recording people like Lowell Folsom and Jimmy McCracklin and Sugar Pie DeSanto, and putting out all kinds of singles and selling them out of the back of his car to all the different record stores in town, and was just a wildly important guy during that time, while there was that scene still existed. His recording studio is now the site of the BART station in West Oakland, so there's nothing to see anymore.
The acoustics are great, though.
Yeah, right. But except when a train comes through. But he's one of those important guys that had a lot to do with a lot of important music that came out of the area that's largely forgotten today.
I know we're talking about like the history of in a lot of older generations, but are there any recent or newer Bay Area rock and roll musicians that you'd like to bring awareness to? For me, a band that I really like is called King Woman. They are like a shoegaze metal band that's led by a woman. Really, really great. Chris, the lead singer, used to work at like Farley's East downtown, and I used to go there when I was in undergrad and getting like coffee, and she was like, one day I'm gonna quit this job and become a rock star, and she totally did it, so I'm very proud of her.
That's what we should have done.
Yeah. So if anybody is into shoegaze with like metal leanings, she a lot of her music is kind of like breaks down a lot of like religious imagery. She grew up in a cult, and she's like, so she kind of like has a lot of like stuff that kind of like rejects a lot of her upbringing. It's just like awesome, and it's like really cool storytelling through music. So I highly recommend King Woman, and she has like a bunch of different side projects where she does like all different kinds of stuff, but that's like her main thing. So are there any newer, and it can be like, I know some bands, have kind of like been inactive or whatever. It can be like anything over the past 10 years that's active or inactive that has like impressed you recently.
Yes. Awesome. Also, I want to say King Woman's bass guitarist cut my hair last week.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She was telling me that she's a musician and she's in that band and another band. I was like, oh yeah, I have heard of you, but I haven't heard you. So yeah, she cut my hair.
Yeah.
So she can do that too.
Oh, awesome.
There's a lot of great bands in the Bay Area. There's like in San Francisco, there's like the fog pop scene, which is bands like the Umbrellas. A lot of these bands kind of, it's kind of like a jangle pop kind of thing. Chime School, which is started out as a solo project of the guy he produces stuff, and he was the drummer of a band called Sea Blight, which unfortunately was a favorite of mine who just broke up last week. They played their last show.
Yeah, Sea Blight was great.
Yeah. They're also kind of shoegaze adjacent.
Yeah.
The Reds, Pinks, and Purples is, like a solo project / band that's sort of in that same vein. I think in the video I mentioned James Wavy, who's kind of like a hip hop soul guy who has a lot of like kitchen sink sounds, and sounds a lot of like it's a lot of like old like Del the Funky Homo Sapien, and just mix there. In fact, he mixes on an album I brought with me today. He mixes in Jefferson Airplane.
Oh, awesome.
White Rabbit is on one of his songs. There's so much great music out here today that I'm much more attuned to it here than I was when I lived in Brooklyn. Like I didn't pay attention to Brooklyn bands when I lived there, but for whatever reason, a lot of the bands that are out here now have really struck me. And a good friend of mine, Andrew, is in a band called The Queen and I, and they just put out an album called That Piece. It's kind of like expansive, shoegaze-ish a little bit. They're
Awesome.
a great band. Yeah, there's a ton of great stuff out.
Yeah,
So
so much. Did you
Have any? Or
No, for me, everything from the last 50 years sounds alike.
yeah, I think I'm starting to get to that age myself. Also, just for for anyone who's curious, because the music is awesome, but also just to be like subversive, I guess, as we're talking about. But someone in the Stax, a member named Donovan, him and his partner have a band that's really good, but it has a really interesting name. It's a Cougar on a Meth Binge. So anyone who wants to hear some great music with an interesting name, check out Cougar on a Meth Binge. So our colleague who is a library worker, he works in the library in the daytime, and then he spends his nights with the band Cougar on a Meth Binge. So, and the music is awesome as well. So I hope that...
With that name, how could it not be?
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Went for broke.
Lastly, you answered this in the video, but anyone who might not have seen the video, what are your 5 favorite Bay Area rock albums? Oh, can I also give mine?
Yep.
Knock
Okay,
yourself out.
awesome. Thank you so much. I know that Mike had this one in his, but I'm from Vallejo, so I'm gonna say Sly Stone Stand, just because I'm from Vallejo and he's awesome. And then let's see. Step 2 by Sylvester. I feel like Sylvester is very much like an unsung hero. And it's just a great album. It's a very, very good album.
It meant a lot to put a Sylvester chapter in the book. So
Yeah.
something we felt was really important. So.
Yeah, so I was really happy to see Sylvester in that. I'm gonna go with the Steve Miller Band, Fly Like an Eagle. For me, once again, I'm not a Deadhead, but in terms of psychedelia, what I liked about Steve in particular, I'm just gonna keep dropping papers. But yeah, I feel like it was more expression versus the aesthetic. The Deadheads had this whole thing going, and I just feel like he was just I just want to make great music. I feel if that makes sense. I don't know if that does, but because for me, I enjoy goth music. I enjoy The Cure and Cocteau Twins and all that stuff, but I don't necessarily embody the aesthetic. I feel like he was more so strictly technique. Another one for me, The Inner Mystique by Chocolate Watch Band. I feel like they're very, very underrated. And then the last one would be a tie between Santana Brajas and Malo album. So I don't mean to copy your choice again, but big fan of the Santana family. Honorable mentions: Operation Ivy. I'm a fan of The Clash, so anything with punk and ska is awesome. Metallica, Master of Puppets, pretty much anything 80s Metallica, everything else kind of sucks to me. But for me, Battery is one of the coolest intros I've ever heard. And then, I think I'm gonna leave it there. But yeah.
We brought some visual aids. So
Awesome.
Mike,
Awesome.
you want to go first? I can pull your 3 out.
Yeah,
pulled from
gee,
my
are there any
record
records left after all that? But
In a lot of storages.
yeah, I'll mention Malo since you brought them up. They were not the first, but one of the pioneer kind of Latin jazz rock fusion groups, and they had a big hit with a tune called Suavecito, which is often referred to as the Chicano national anthem. And they had a beautiful sound, and as soon as their first album came out, half the band turned over. And they did a second album, which is also really good, but sounds very different. It's more has more horns and things in it. But Malo's a great group that deserves a lot of attention. There are a couple of other ones here that we pulled out of Crispin's personal library. Volunteers, Jefferson Airplane. This is my personal favorite Airplane album because it's very straight ahead. Kind of what you were saying about Steve Miller. It's very no-nonsense rock and roll. It's got great lyrics. It has a great spirit to it. It's very political. It was one of the first mainstream albums that used profanity on it, which they got into some trouble for. This is 1969. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is this the last album with Marty Balin in the group?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a great record. What else have we got here? This is another Jefferson Airplane album. This is called Surrealistic Pillow. This was their second album. Their first album, Jefferson Airplane Takes Off, was almost a kind of folk rock album. This one marks the addition of Grace Slick as their lead vocalist. And it has, two of their most notable songs, Somebody to Love and White Rabbit, which is a song that Grace Slick brought with her from her old band, which was called The Great Society, who were produced by Sylvester Stewart, a.k.a. Sly Stone.
Yep.
One fun fact here, and speaking of the Grateful Dead, if you've ever looked closely at this album cover, you'll notice in the background there are some strange hieroglyphics drawn on the wall, as well as a few other pieces of graffiti. And you'll notice the same wall in the background of a lot of pictures of the Grateful Dead and a lot of other members of the San Francisco rock community. From the 60s, it was in the apartment and studio of a very great photographer named Herb Green, who took all these pictures. And that's why, and it's still there, to the best of my knowledge. What else have we got in your bag of tricks there?
I brought completely different choices from the ones on the video because I didn't want to. So there's
I'll just mention a couple of my other choices,
Yeah, do
since he walked all over most of them. There's a Sly Stone album here that you didn't mention, which is the equal, at least, of the one that you mentioned, and this is called There's a Riot Going On. This is a really great album. I think Stand and There's a Riot Going On were kind of their peak creatively, personally, before things began to kind of fall apart a little bit.
Running Away is like one of my
Who else did I mention in the video? I mentioned
Malo.
I also want to throw out Etta James, her album for her debut album from 1960. Honestly, I think that she's probably done better albums than that one, but that was her debut album. It has that her signature tune At Last that's on there. And she's just a really amazing, unique artist who is often associated with Los Angeles, but she actually grew up largely in San Francisco, was discovered here, and kind of began her career here, and always had a special relationship with this area.
Yeah, she also, I believe she also performed in Russell City as well before it got annexed into Hayward.
Could be. One other sort of fun fact, she was discovered and initially, kind of made a professional by a guy named Johnny Otis, who is from here in Berkeley, who was a white guy pretending to be black, and was enormously influential in the early R&B scene, and had a whole stable of artists that he introduced, including Sugar Pie DeSanto, but most notably Etta James.
Awesome.
So I brought James Wavy, Snowy Beach. This is the one that has White Rabbit sample on it. This is on Dandy Boy Records, which is a great local indie label. Let's see, I brought my favorite Brian Jonestown Massacre album, Give It Back. It's not always everybody's favorite pick, but it's really kind of gauzy and weird and psychedelic, and I like it a lot. I brought, obviously, a very famous album, Dookie by Green Day. That's Berkeley getting bombed, and there's a monkey in the corner that's going to throw some poop on it. That's pretty cool.
Nice.
And let's see what else I read. Oh, this is my friend Andrew's band. The Queen and I, At Peace. It's a great record. I think I got one more. I did not bring Anthem of the Sun, The Grateful Dead. Yes. Because I knew you were going to shit on it. I brought Chime School, the first Chime School album, which is on Slumberland, which is another great kind of local indie label. That one's been around for a long time.
I'm going to throw one more out there, just because we haven't really talked about them at all today, and that is Creedence Clearwater Revival. They produced a bunch of really great albums in a very brief period of time. My personal favorite is Green River, which has Lodi on it. It has a Bad Moon Rising. They're from El Cerrito, just up the road.
Tombstone Shadow was on that, right?
I didn't know they were.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah. Also, speaking of Dookie,
The album.
the album. If we're talking about things that are not Dookie, that's not related to the album. The bathroom closes 15 minutes before we close, so at 7:45. So if anybody have roughly 29 minutes to do so.
We won't be offended.
But so we have vinyls. There's a little mini display like before you walk in, just to the left, of some albums. We have Green Day, Dookie. We also have Kerplunk. I personally am a Kerplunk guy. I like Dookie. It's really great. The album, but for me, I really like Kerplunk. Kerplunk is that's my one from them in particular. So we have both of those on display over there that are available to check out. Just like across the corner, there's also music scores. So we have like Santana's music, sheet music. We have Metallica sheet music. We have Creedence Clearwater sheet music. We have the Pearl album from Janis Joplin, the sheet music. We have some Grateful Dead. It probably won't be checked out, but we have their sheet music as well. So feel free to check out there's a bunch of books, CDs, vinyls, DVDs about a bunch of different Bay Area musicians. So.